Chapter 22. Mr. Rochester had given me but 1 week's leave of absence, yet a month elapsed before I quitted Gateshead. I wished to leave immediately after the funeral, but Georgiana entreated me to stay till she could get off to London, whither she was now at last invited by her uncle, Mr. Gibson, who had come down to direct his sister's interment and settle the family affairs. Georgiana said she dreaded being left alone with Eliza. For her, she got nearly no sympathy in her dejection, support in her fears, nor aid in her preparations. So I bore with her feeble-minded wailings and selfish lamentations, as well as I could, and did my best in sewing for her and packing her dresses. It is true that while I worked, she would idle, and I thought to myself, if you and I were destined to always live together, cousin, we would commence matters in very different footing. I should not settle tamely down into being the forbearing party. I should assign you your share of labor and compel you to accomplishment. Or else, should it be left undone, I should insist also on your keeping some of the drawing, half insincere complaints, hushed in your own breast. It is only because our connection happens to be very transitory and comes at a peculiarly mournful season that I consent thus to render it so patient and compliant on my part. At last I saw Georgiana off, but now it was Eliza's turn to request me to stay another week. Her plans require all her time and attention, she said. She was about to depart for some unknown bourne, and all day long she stayed in her own room, her door bolted within, filling trunks, emptying drawers, burning papers, holding no communication with anyone. She wished me to look over the house, to see the callers, and answer notes of condolence. One morning she told me I was at liberty, and, she added, I am obliged to you for your valuable services and discreet conduct. There is some difference between living with such one as you and with Georgiana. You perform your part in life and burden no one. Tomorrow, she continued, I set out for the continent. I shall take up my abode in a religious house near Lisle, a nunnery you will call it. There I shall be quiet and unmolested. I shall devote myself for a time to examination of Roman Catholic dogmas, and to a careful study of workings in the system. If I find it be, as I half suspect it is, the one best calculated to ensure the doing of all things decently and in order, I shall embrace the tenets of Rome and probably take the veil. I neither expressed surprise at this resolution nor attempt to dissuade her from it. The vocation will fit you to a hair, I thought. Much good it do you. When we parted, she said, Goodbye, Cousin Jane Eyre. I wish you well. You have some sense. Then I returned, You are not without sense, Cousin Eliza, but what you have, I suppose, in another year will be walled up alive in a French convent. However, it is not my business, so it suits you. I don't much care. You are right, she said, and with these words, we each went our separate way. As I shall not have occasion to refer either to her or her sister again, I may as well mention here that Georgiana made an advantageous match with a wealthy, worn-out man of fashion, and that Eliza actually took the veil and is at this day superior of the convent, where she passed the period of her novitiate, and which she endowed with her fortune. How people feel when they are returning home from an absence, long or short, I did not know. I had never experienced the sensation. I had known what it was to come back to Gateshead when a child, after a long walk, to be scolded for looking cold or gloomy, and later, what it was to come back from church to Lowood, to long for a plenteous meal and good fire, and to be unable to get either. Neither of these returnings was very pleasant or desirable. No magnet drew me to a given point, increasing its strength of attraction to the nearer I came. The return to Thornhead was yet to be tried. My journey seemed tedious, very tedious. 50 miles one day, a night spent at an inn, 50 miles the next day. During the first 12 hours, I thought of Miss Reed in her last moments. I saw her disfigured and discolored face, and heard her strangely altered voice. I mused on the funeral day, the coffin, the hearse, the black train of tenants and servants. Few was the number of relatives, the gaping vault, the silent church, the solemn service. Then I thought of Eliza and Georgiana. I beheld one cynosure of a ballroom, the other the inmate of a convent cell. I dwelt on and analyzed their separate peculiarities of person and character. The evening arrival at a great town scattered these thoughts. Night gave them quite another turn. Laid down on my traveler's bed, I left reminiscent for anticipation. I was going back to Thornfield, but how long was I to stay there? Not long, of that I was sure. I had heard Miss Fairfax in the interim of my absence. The party at the hall was dispersed. Mr. Rochester had left for London 3 weeks ago, but he was then expected to return in a fortnight. Mrs. Fairfax surmised that he was gone to make arrangements for his wedding, as he had talked of purchasing a new carriage. She said the idea of his marrying Mrs. Ingram still seemed strange to her, but from what everybody saw and from what she had herself seen, she could no longer doubt that the event would shortly take place. "You would be strangely incredulous if you did doubt it," was my mental comment. "I don't doubt it." The question followed. Where was I to go? I dreamt of Miss Ingram all night. In a vivid morning dream, I saw her closing the gates of Thornfield against me and pointing me out another road, and Mr. Rochester looked on with his arms folded, smiling sardonically as it seemed, both at her and me. I had not notified Mrs. Fairfax the exact day of my return, for I did not wish either car or carriage to meet me at Millcote. I proposed to walk the distance quietly myself, and very quietly. After leaving my box at the ostler's care, I did slip away from the George Inn about 6 o'clock on June evening, and take the old road to Thornfield, a road which lay chiefly through fields and was now little frequented. It was not a bright and splendid summer evening, though fair and soft. The haymakers were at work all along the road, and the sky, though far from cloudless, was such as promised well for the future. Its blue, where blue was visible, was mild and settled, and its cloud strata high and thin. The west, too, was warm. No watery gleam chilled it. It seemed as if there was a fire lit, an altar burning beneath its screen of marbled vapor, and out of apertures shone a golden redness. I felt glad as the road shortened before me, so glad that I stopped once to ask myself what that joy meant, and to remind reason that it was not my home I was going to, or to a permanent resting place, or to a place where fond friends looked out for me and waited my arrival. Mrs. Fairfax will smile with you, or a calm welcome to be sure, I said, and a little Adele will clap her hands and jump to see you. But you know very well you are thinking of another and that he is not thinking of you. But what is so headstrong as youth? What is so blind as inexperience? These affirmed that it was pleasure enough to have the privilege of again looking on Mr. Rochester, whether he looked on me or not, and they added, "Hasten, hasten, be with him while you may. But a few more days or weeks at most, and you are parted him forever." And then I strangled a newborn agony a deformed thing which I could not persuade myself to own and rear, and ran on. They are making hay too in Thornfield Meadows, or rather the labourers are just quitting their work and returning home with their rakes on their shoulders, now at the hour I arrive. I have but a field or two to traverse, then I shall cross the road and reach the gates. How full the hedges are of roses! But I have no time to gather any. I want to be at the house. I pass a tall briar shooting leafy and flowery branches across the path. I see the narrow stile with stone steps, and I see Mr. Rochester sitting there, a book and a pencil in his hand. He is writing. Well, he is not a ghost. Yet every nerve I have is unstrung. For a moment, I am beyond my own mastery. What does it mean? I did not think I should tremble in this way when I saw him, or lose my voice or the power of motion in his presence. I will go back as soon as I can stir. I need not make an absolute fool of myself. I know another way to the house. It does not signify if I knew 20 ways, for he has seen me. "Hello," he cries, and he puts up his book and pencil. "There you are. Come, if you please." I suppose I do come on, though in what fashion I knew not. Being scarcely cognizant of my movements and solicitous only to appear calm, and above all to control the working muscles of my face, which I feel rebel insolent against my will, and struggle to express what I have resolved to conceal. But I have a veil, and it is down. I may shift, yet to behave with decent composure. "And this is Jane Eyre. Are you coming from Millcourt? On foot?" "Yes, just one of your tricks. Not to send for a carriage and come clattering over street and road like a common mortal, but to steal into a vicinage of your home along with twilight, just as if you were a dream or a shade. What the deuce have you done with yourself this last month?" "I have been with my aunt, sir, who is dead." A true Janian reply. Good angels be on my guard. She comes from another world, from the abode of people who are dead, and tells me so when she meets me alone here in the gloaming. If I dared you, I'd touch you to see if you are of substance or shadow, you elf. But I'd as soon offer to take hold of a blue ignis fatuus, light in the marsh. Truant, he added, when he had paused an instant. Absent from me a whole month, forgetting me quite, I'll be sworn. I knew there would be pleasure in meeting my master again, even though broken by fear that he was so soon to cease to be my master. But by the knowledge I was nothing to him, but there was ever in Mr. Rochester, so at least I thought, such a wealth of power of communicating happiness that to taste but of the crumbs he scattered to stray and stranger birds like me was to feast genially. His last words were balm. They seemed to imply that it imported something to him whether I forgot him or not. And he had spoken of Thornfield as my home. Would that it were my home. He did not leave the stile, and I hardly liked to ask to go by. I inquired soon if he had not been to London. Yes, I suppose you found that out by second sight. Mrs. Fairfax told me in a letter. And did she inform you what I wanted to do? Yes, sir. Everyone knew your errand. You must see the carriage, Jane. Tell me if you don't think it will suit Mrs. Rochester exactly. Whether she won't like Queen Boadicea leaning back against those purple cushions. I wish, Jane, I were a trifle better adapted to match her externally. Tell me now, fairy as you are, can't you give me a charm or philter or something of that sort, to make me a handsome man. It would be past the power of magic, sir, and, in thought, I added, a loving eye is all the charm needed. To such you are handsome enough, or rather your sternness has a power beyond beauty. Rochester had sometimes read my unspoken thoughts with an acumen to me incomprehensible. In the present instance, he took no notice of my abrupt vocal response, but he smiled with a certain smile he had of his own, and which he used but on rare occasions. He seemed to think it too good for common purposes. It was the real sunshine of feeling. He shed it over me now. Pass, Jeanette, he said, making room for me to cross the tile. Go up home. Stay your weary little wandering feet at a friend's threshold. All I had now to do was to obey him in silence. No need for me to colloquialize further. I got over the stile without a word and meant to leave him calmly, but an impulse held me fast. A force turned me around. I said, or something in me said for me, and in spite of me. Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your kindness. I am strangely glad to be back again to you, and wherever you are is my home, my only home. I walked on so fast that even he could hardly have overtaken me if he tried. Little Adele was half wild with delight when she saw me. Mrs. Fairfax received me with her usual plain friendliness. Leah smiled, and Sophie bid me bonsoir with glee. This was very pleasant. There is no happiness like that of being loved by your fellow creatures, and feeling that your presence is an addition to their comfort. I that evening shut my eyes resolutely against the future. I stopped my cars against the voice that kept warning me of near separation and coming grief. When tea was over and Mrs. Fairfax had taken her knitting, I had assumed a low seat near her, and Adele, kneeling on the carpet, had nestled close up to me, and a sense of mutual affection seemed to surround us with a ring of golden peace. I uttered a silent prayer that we might not be parted far or soon. But when, as thus sat, Mr. Rochester entered, unannounced, and looking at us, seemed to take pleasure in the spectacle of a group so amicable. When he said he was supposed the old lady was all right now that she had her adopted daughter back again, and added that he saw Adele was prête et croquer sa petite maman anglaise, I half ventured to hope that he would, even after his marriage, keep us together, somewhere under the shelter of his protection, and not quite exiled from the sunshine of his presence. A fortnight of dubious calm succeeded my return to Thornfield Hall. Nothing was said of the master's marriage, and I saw no preparations going on for such an event. Almost every day I asked Mrs. Fairfax if she had yet heard anything decided. Her answer was always in the negative. Once she had actually put the question to Mr. Rochester as to when he was going to bring his bride home. But he had answered her only by a joke and one of his queer looks. She could not tell what to make of him. One thing specifically surprised me, and that was there were no journeying backward or forward, no visits to Ingram Park. To be sure, it was 20 miles off on the borders of another country. But what was that distance to an ardent lover? To so practiced and indefatigable a horseman as Mr. Rochester, it would be a morning's ride. I began to cherish hopes I had no right to conceive that the match was broken off, that the rumor had been mistaken, that one or both parties had changed their minds. I used to look at my master's face to see if it were sad or fierce, but I could not remember the last time when it had been so uniformly clear of clouds and evil feelings, or evil feelings. If, in the moments I and my people spent with him, I lacked spirits and sank into inevitable dejection, he became even gay. Never had he called me more frequently to his presence, never been kinder to me when there, and alas, never had I loved him so well. Chapter 23. A splendid midsummer shone over England, skies so pure, sun so radiant, as were there seen in long succession, seldom favor of even singly our wave-girt land. It was as if a band of Italian days had come from the south, like a flock of glorious passenger birds, and lighted to rest them on the cliffs of Albion. The hay was all got in, the fields round Thordfield were green and shone, the roads white and baked, the trees were in their dark prime, hedge and wood, full-leaved, deeply tinted, contrasted well with the sunny hue of the cleared meadows between. On Midsummer Eve, Adele, wary with gathering wild strawberries in Hay Lane half the day, had gone to bed with the sun. I watched her drop asleep, and when I left her, I sought the garden. It was now the sweetest hour of the 24. Day its fervid fires had wasted, and dew fell cool on panting plain and scorched summit. Where the sun had gone in simple state, pure of the pomp clouds spread a solemn purple, burning with the light of red jewel and furnace flame on one point, on one hill peak, and extending high and wide, soft and still softer, over Half Haven. The east had its own charm, and fine deep blue, and its own modest gem, a casino and solitary star. Soon it will boast the moon, but she was yet beneath the horizon. I walked a while on the pavement, but still a subtle, well-known scent, that of a cigar, stole from the window. I saw the library casement with its open handbreadth. I knew I might be watched thence, so I went apart into the orchard. No nook in the grounds more sheltered and more Eden-like. It was full of trees, it bloomed with flowers, a very high wall shut it out from the court. On one side, and on the other, a beech avenue screened it from the lawn. At the bottom was a sunk fence, its sole separation from lonely fields. A winding walk bordered the laurels and terminating of the giant horse chestnut, circled at the base by a seat, led down to the fence. Here one can wander unseen. While such honeydew fell, such silence reigned, such gloaming gathered, I felt as if I could haunt such a shade forever, but in threading the flower and fruit parterres at the upper part of the enclosure, enticed there by the light now rising moon cast on this more open quarter, my step is swayed, not by sound but by sight, but once more by a warming, not by sound, not by sight, but once more by a warning fragrance. Sweet briar and southern wood, jasmine, pink, and rose have long been yielding their evening sacrifice of incense. This new scent is neither a shrub or flower. It is, I know it well, it is Mr. Rochester's cigar. I look round and I listen. I see trees laden with ripening fruit. I hear a nightingale warbling in a wood half a mile off. No moving form is visible. No coming step is audible. But that perfume increases, I must glee. I must make for the wicket leading to the shrubbery. And I see Mr. Rochester entering. I step aside into the ivy recess. He will not stay long. He will not. He will soon return whence he came, and if I sit still, he will never see me. But no. Evening tide is as pleasant to him as to me, and this antique garden is attractive, and he strolls on, now lifting the gooseberry tree branches to look at the fruit, large as plums, with which they are laden, now taking a ripe cherry from the wall, now stooping toward a knot of flowers, either to inhale their fragrance or admire the dew beads on their pearls. A great moth goes humming by me. It alights on a plant at Mr. Rochester's foot. He sees it, and bends to examine it. Now he has his back towards me, I thought. And he is occupied too. Perhaps if I walk slowly I can slip away unnoticed. I trod on, edging of turf, that the crackle of the pebbly gravel might not betray me. He was standing among the beds, at a yard or two distant from where I had to pass. The moth apparently engaged him. I shall get by very well, I meditated, as I crossed his shadow, thrown long over the garden by the moon, not yet risen high. He said quietly, without turning, "Jane, come look at this fellow." I had made no noise. He had not eyes behind. Could his shadow feel? I started at first, and then I approached him. "Look at its wings," he said. "He reminds me rather of a West Indian insect. One does not often see so large and gay a night rover in England. There. He is flown." The moth roamed away. I was sheepishly retreating also, but Mr. Rochester followed me, and when we reached the thicket, he said, "Turn back. On so lovely a night it is a shame to sit in the house. And surely no one can wish to go to bed while sunset is thus at meeting with moonrise. It is one of my faults, that though my tongue is sometimes prompt enough in answer, there are times when it is sadly failing me in framing an excuse. As always, the lapse occurs at some crisis, when a facile word or plausible pretext is specially wanted to get me out of painful embarrassment. I did not like to walk at this hour alone with Mr. Rochester in a shadowy orchard, but I could not find a reason to allege for leaving him. I followed with lagging step, and thoughts busily went on discovering means of extrication, but he himself looked so composed, so grave also. I became ashamed of my own feeling of confusion. The evil, if evil existed, or perspective was there, seemed to lie with me only, his mind unconscious and quiet. "Jane," he recommenced, as we entered the laurel walk, and slowly strayed down in the direction of the sunk fence and horse chestnut. "Thornfield is a pleasant place in summer, is it not?" "Yes, sir." "You must have become some degree attached to the house, you, who have an eye for natural beauties and a good deal of the organ of adhesiveness." "I am attached to it indeed." "And though I don't comprehend how it is, I perceive you have acquired a degree of regard for that foolish little child, Adele, too, and even for that simple Dame Fairfax." "Yes, sir, in both ways. I have affection for both." "And would be sorry to part it?" Yes. Pity, he said, and sighed and paused. It is always the way of events in this life. He continued presently. No sooner have you got settled in a pleasant resting place than a voice calls out to you to rise. Move on, for the hour of repose is expired. Must I move on, sir? I asked. Must I leave Thornfield? I believe you must, Jane. I'm sorry, Jeanette, but I believe, indeed, you must. This was a blow, but I did not let it prostrate me. Well, sir, I shall be ready when the order to march comes. It is come now. I must give it tonight. Then you are going to be married, sir? Exactly. Precisely. With your usual acuteness, you have hit the nail straight on the head. Soon, sir. Very soon, that is, Miss Eyre. And you'll remember, Jane, the first time I, or rumor, plainly intimated to you that it was my intention to put my old bachelor's neck in the sacred noose, to enter into the holy state of matrimony, to take Miss Ingram to my bosom. She's, in short, an extensive armful, but that's not to the point. One can't have too much of a very excellent thing as my beautiful Blanche. Well, as I was saying, listen to me, Jane. You're turning your head to look for more moths, aren't you? That was only a lady clock, child. Fly away home. I wish to remind you that it was you who first said to me that with that discretion I respect in you, with that foresight, prudence, humility which befit your responsible, independent position, that in case I married Miss Ingram, both you and little Adele had better trot forthwith. I pass over the sort of slur conveyed in this suggestion on the character of my beloved. Indeed, when you are far away, Jeanette, I'll try to forget. I shall notice only its wisdom, which is such that I have made it my law of action. Adele must go to school, and you, Miss Eyre, must get a new situation. Sir, yes, I will advertise immediately, and meantime, I suppose... I was going to say, I suppose I may stay here till I find another shelter to betake myself to. But I stopped, feeling it would not do to risk a long sentence, for my voice was not quite under control. In about a month I hope to be a bridegroom, continued Mr. Rochester. In the interim, I myself look out for employment and an asylum for you. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry to give... Oh, no need to apologize. I consider that when a dependent does her duty as well as you have done yours, she has a sort of claim upon her employer for a little assistance he can conveniently render her. Instead, I have already, through my future mother-in-law, heard of a place that I think will suit. It is an undertake the education of 5 daughters of Mrs. Dionysus O'Gall of Bitternut Lodge, Connaught, Ireland. You'll like Ireland, I think. There's such warm-hearted people there, they say. It is such a long way off, sir. No matter. A girl of your sense will not object to the voyage or the distance. Not the voyage, but the distance. And then the sea is a barrier. From what, Jane? From England, and from Thornfield, and... Well? From you, sir. I said this almost involuntarily, and with as little sanction of free will, my tears gushed out. I did not cry so as to be heard, however. I avoided sobbing. I thought of Mrs. O'Gall and Bitternut Lodge struck cold to my heart, and colder to the thought of all the brine and foam destined, as it seemed, to rush between me and the master whose side I now walked. The coldest, the remembrance of the wider ocean, wealth, caste, custom, intervened between me and what I naturally and inevitably loved. It is a long way, I said again. It is, to be sure. And when you get to Bitternut Lodge, Connaught Island, I shall never see you again, Jane. That's morally certain. I never go to Ireland, not having myself much of a fancy for the country. We've been good friends, Jane, have we not? Yes, sir. And when friends are on the eve of separation, they like to spend a little time that remains to them close to each other. Come, we'll talk over the voyage and the parting quietly half-hour or so, while the stars enter their shining life up in heaven yonder. Here is the chestnut tree. Here is the bench at its roots. Come, we will sit here in peace tonight, though we should never more be destined to sit here together. He seated me and himself. It is a long way to Ireland, Jeanette, and I am sorry to send my little friend on such weary travels. But if I can't do better, how is it to be helped? Are you anything akin to me, do you think, Jane? I could risk no sort of answer by this time. My heart was still. Because, he said, I sometimes have a queer feeling with regard to you, especially when you are near me, as now. It is as if I had a string somewhere under my ribs, tightly and inextricably knotted to a similar string, situated in the corresponding quarter of your little frame. If that boisterous channel and 200 miles or so of land come broad between us, I am afraid that cord of communion will be snapped. And then I've a nervous notion I should take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me. That I never should, sir. You know. It was impossible to proceed. Jane, do you hear that nightingale singing in the wood? Listen. In listening, I sobbed convulsively, for I could repress what I endured no longer. I was obliged to yield and was shaken from head to foot with acute distress. When I did speak, it was only to express an impetuous wish that I had never been born, that I had never come to Thornfield. Because you are sorry to leave it. The vehemence of emotion, stirred by grief and love within me, was claiming mastery, struggling for full sway, and asserting a right to predominate, to overcome, to live, rise and reign at last. Yes, and to speak. I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love Thornfield. I love it because I have lived in it a full and delightful life, momentarily at least. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds, excluded from every glimpse of a communion with what is brought and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous, and expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester. It strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking at the necessity of death. Where do you see the necessity? He asked suddenly. Where? You, sir, have placed it before me. In what shape? In the shape of Miss Ingram. A noble and beautiful woman, your bride. My bride? What bride? I have no bride. But you will have. Yes, I will. I will, he said. He set his teeth. Then I must go. You have said it yourself. No, you must stay. And the oath shall be kept. I tell you, I must go, I retorted, roused to something like passion. Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automation, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips, my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I am not talking to you now through the medium of custom conventionalities, nor even mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit. Just as if both had passed through the grave, and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are. As we are, repeated Mr. Rochester. So, he added, enclosing me in his arms, gathering me to his breast, pressing his lips on my lips. So, Jane. Yes, so, sir, I rejoined, and yet not so. For you are a married man, or as good as a married man. Wed to one inferior to you. To whom? To one with whom you have no sympathy. Who I do not believe you truly love, for I have seen and heard you sneer at her. I would scorn such union. Therefore, I am better than you. Let me go. Where, Jane? To Ireland? Yes, to Ireland. I have spoken my mind, and can go anywhere now. Jane, be still. Don't struggle so. Like a wild, frantic bird that is rending its own plumage in its desperation. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you. Another effort set me at liberty, and I stood erect before him. And your will shall decide your destiny, he said. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all my possessions. You play a farce, which I merely laugh at. I ask you to pass through life at my side. Be my second self and best earthly companion. For that fate you have already made your choice and must abide it. Jane, be still a few moments. You are overexcited. I will be still too. A waft of wind came sweeping down the laurel walk and trembled through the boughs of the chestnut. It wandered away, away, to an indefinite distance. It died. The nightingale's song was then the only voice of the hour. In listening to it, I again wept. Mr. Rochester sat quiet, looking at me, gently and seriously. Some time passed before he spoke. At last he said, "Come to my side, Jane. Let us explain and understand one another." "I will never again come to your side. I am torn away now. I cannot return." "But Jane, I summon you as my wife. It is you, only you, I intend to marry." I was silent. I thought he mocked me. "Come, Jane, come hither. Your bride stands between us." He rose, and with a stride reached me. My bride is here," he said, drawing again me close to him, "because my equal is here, and my likeness. Jane, will you marry me?" Still, I do not answer, and still I writhed myself from his grasp, for I was still incredulous. "Do you doubt me, Jane?" "Entirely." "You have no faith in me?" "Not a whit." "Am I a liar in your eyes?" he asked passionately. "Little skeptic, you shall be convinced. What love have I for Miss Ingram? None. That you know. What love has she for me? None. As I have taken pains to prove. I caused a rumor to reach her that my fortune was not a third of what was supposed. And after I presented myself to see the result, it was coldness both from her and her mother. I could not marry Miss Ingram. You strange, you almost unearthly thing I love as my own flesh, you, poor and obscure and plain and small as you are, I entreat to accept me as a husband." "What, me?" I ejaculated, beginning in his earnestness, and especially in his incivility, to credit his sincerity. "Me who have not a friend in the world but you. If you are my friend, not a shilling, but what have you given me?" "You, Jane. I must have you for my own, entirely for my own. Will you be mine? Say yes, quickly." "Mr. Rochester, let me look at your face. Turn to the moonlight." "Why?" "Because I want to read your countenance. Turn." "There. You will find it scarcely more legible than a crumpled, scratched page. Read on. Only make haste, for I suffer." His face was very much agitated, very much flushed, and there were strong workings in the features, strange gleams in the eyes. "Oh, Jane, you torture me," he exclaimed. With that searching and yet faithful and generous look, you torture me. How can I do that? If you are true and your offer real, my only feelings to you must be gratitude and devotion. They cannot torture. Gratitude, he ejaculated and added wildly, Jane, accept me quickly. Say Edward, my given name, Edward. I will marry you. Are you earnest? Do you truly love me? Do you sincerely wish me to be your wife? I do, and if an oath is necessary to satisfy you, I swear it. Then, sir, I will marry you. Edward, my little wife. Dear Edward, come to me entirely now, said he, and added in his deepest tone, speaking in my ear as his cheek was laid on mine, my happiness, I will make yours. God pardon me, he subjoined ere long. And man, meddle not with me, I have her. I will hold her. There is no one to meddle, sir. I have no kindred to interfere. No, and that is the best of it, he said. And if I had not loved him less, I should have thought his accent and look of exultation savage. But sitting by him, roused from the nightmare of parting, called to the paradise of union, I look only of the bliss given to me in drink, so abundant a flow. Again and again he said, Are you happy, Jane? And again I answered, Yes. For which, after, he murmured, It will atone. It will atone. Have I not found her friendliness and cold and comfortless? Will I not guard and cherish and solace her? Is there not love in my heart and constancy in my resolves? It will expiate at God's tribunal. I know my Maker sanctions what I do, for the world's judgment. I wash my hands thereof. For man's opinion I defy it. But what had befallen that night? The moon was not yet set, and we were all in shadow. I could scarcely see my master's face, near as I was. And what ailed the chestnut tree? It writhed and groaned, while wind roared over the laurel walk, and came sweeping over us. We must go in, said Mr. Rochester. The wind changes. I could have sat with thee till morning, Jane. And so, thought I, could I with you. I should have said so, perhaps, but a vivid spark leapt out of a cloud at which I was looking, and there was a crack, a crash, and close, rattling peal. I thought only of hiding my dazzled eyes against Mr. Rochester's shoulder. The rain rushed down. He hurried me up the walk, through the grounds, and into the house. But we were quite wet before we could pass the threshold. He was taking off my shawl in the hall and shaking the water out of my loosened hair, when Miss Fairfax emerged from her room. I did not observe her at first, nor did Mr. Rochester. The lamp was lit. The clock was on the stroke of 12. Hasten, take off your wet things, he said. And before you go, good night. Good night, my darling. He kissed me repeatedly. When I looked up on leaving his arms, there stood a window, pale, grave, and amazed. I smiled at her and ran upstairs. Explanation will do for another time, thought I. Still, when I reached my chamber, I felt the pang at the idea she should even temporarily misconstrue what she had seen. But joy effaced every other feeling, and loud as the wind blew, near and deep as the thunder crash, fierce and frequent as the lightning gleamed, cataract-like as the rain fell during a storm of 2 hours' duration, I experienced no fear and little awe. Mr. Rochester came thrice to my door in the course of it to ask if I was safe and tranquil, and that was my comfort too. That was my strength for anything. Before I left my bed in the morning, little Adele came running in to tell me that the great horse chestnut at the bottom of the orchard had been struck by lightning in the night and split of it away. Chapter 24. As I rose and dressed, I thought over what had happened and wondered if it were a dream. I could not be certain of the reality till I seen Mr. Rochester again, heard him renew his words of love and promise. While I arranged my hair, I looked at my face in the glass. It was no longer plain. There was hope in its aspect and life in its color, and my eyes seemed as if they had beheld the font of fruition and borrowed beams from the lustrous ripple. I had often been unwilling to look at my master, because I feared he could not be pleased at my look, but I was sure I might lift my face to this now, and not cool his affection by its expression. I took a plain but clean and light summer dress from my drawer and put it on. It seemed no attire had ever so well become me, because none had I ever worn in so blissful a mood. I was not surprised when I ran down into the hall to see that a brilliant June morning had succeeded to the tempest of the night, and to feel, through the open glass door, the breathing of a fresh and fragrant breeze. Nature must be gladsome when I was so happy. A beggar woman and her little boy, pale, ragged objects both, were coming up the walk. I ran down and gave them all the money I happened to have in my purse, some 3 or 4 shillings. Good or bad, they must partake of my jubilee. The rooks cawed, and blithered birds sang, but nothing was so merry or so musical as my own rejoicing heart. Mrs. Fairfax surprised me by looking out of the window with sad countenance and saying gravely, "Miss Eyre, will you come to breakfast?" During the meal she was quiet and cool, but I could not undeceive her then. I must wait for my master to give explanations, and so must she. I ate what I could and hastened upstairs. I met Adele leaving the schoolroom. "Where are you going? It's time for lessons." "Mr. Rochester has sent me away to the nursery." "Where is he?" "In there," pointing to the apartment she had left, and I went in, and there he stood. "Come and bid me good morning," said he. I gladly advanced, and it was not merely a cold word now, or even the shake of a hand I received, but an embrace and a kiss. It seemed natural, it seemed genial to be so well loved and so caressed by him. "Jane, you look blooming and smiling and pretty," said he, "truly pretty this morning. Is this my pale little elf? Is this my mustard seed? This little sunny-faced girl with a dimpled cheek and rosy lips, the satin-smooth hazel hair and the radiant hazel eyes?" I had green eyes, reader, but you must excuse the mistake. For him, they were new-dyed, I supposed. "It is Jane Eyre, sir." "Soon to be Jane Rochester," he added. "In 4 weeks, Jeanette. Not a day more. Do you hear that?" I did, and I could not quite comprehend it. It made me giddy. The feeling the announcement sent through me was something stronger than was consistent with joy, something that smote and stunned. It was, I think, almost fear. You blushed, and now you are white, Jane. What is that for? Because you have given me a new name, Jane Rochester. It seems so strange. Yes, Mrs. Rochester, said he. Young Mrs. Rochester. Fairfax Rochester's girl bride. It can never be, sir. It does not sound likely. Human beings never enjoy complete happiness in this world. I was not born for a different destiny to the rest of my species. To imagine such a lot befalling me is a fairy tale, a daydream, which I can and will realize. I shall begin today. This morning I wrote to my banker in London to send me certain jewels he has in his keeping, heirlooms for the ladies of Thornfield. In a day or two I hope to pour them into your lap, for every privilege, every attention shall be yours that I would afford a peer's daughter, if about to marry her. Ah, sir, never rain jewels. I don't like to hear them spoken of. Jewels for Jane Eyre sounds unnatural and strange. I would rather not have them. I will myself put the diamond chain around your neck, the circlet on your forehead, which it will become, for nature at least has stamped her patent of nobility on this brow, Jane. I will clasp the bracelets on these fine wrists, load these fairy-like fingers with rings. No, sir. Think of other subjects, speak of other things, and in another strain. Don't address me as if I were beauty. I am your plain Quakerish governess. You are beauty in my eyes, and beauty just after the desire of my heart, delicate and aerial. Puny and insignificant, you mean? You are dreaming, sir, or you are sneering. For God's sake, don't be ironical. I will make the world acknowledge you a beauty, he went on, while I really became uneasy with the strain he had adopted, because I felt he was either deluding himself or trying to delude me. I will attire my Jane in satin and lace. She shall have roses in her hair. I will cover the head I love best with a priceless veil. And then you won't know me, sir. I shall not be a Jane Eyre any longer, but an ape in Harlequin's jacket, a jay in borrowed plumes. I would as soon see you, Mr. Rochester, tricked out in stage trappings, as myself clad in court lady's robe. And I don't call you handsome, sir, though I love you most dearly, far too dearly to flatter you. Don't flatter me. He pursued in his theme, however, without noticing my depreciation. This very day I shall take you in the carriage to Millcourt, and you must choose some dresses for yourself. I told you we shall be married in 4 weeks. The wedding is to take place quietly in the church down below yonder. Then I shall waft you away to Wanstead town. After a brief stay there, I shall bear my treasures to regions nearer the sun, to French vineyards and Italian plains. She shall see whatever is famous in old story and in modern record. She shall taste, too, the life of cities, and she shall learn to value herself by comparison with others. Shall I travel? And with you, sir? You shall sojourn at Paris, Rome, and Naples, at Florence, Venice, Vienna. All the ground I have wandered over shall be retrodden by you. Wherever I stamped my hoof, your sideless foot shall step also. 10 years since, I flew through Europe, half mad with disgust hate and rage as my companions. Now, I shall revisit it healed and cleansed, with a very angel as my comforter." I laughed at him as he said this. "I am not an angel," I asserted, "and I will not be one till I die. I will be myself, Mr. Rochester. You must neither expect nor exact anything celestial of me, for you will not get it, any more than I shall get it out of you, which I do not at all anticipate." "What do you anticipate of me?" "For a little while you will perhaps be as you are now, a very little while, and then you will turn cool, and then you will be capricious, and then you will be stern, and I shall have much ado to please you. But when you get well used to me, you will perhaps like me again. Like me, I say, not love me. I suppose you'll love and effervesce in 6 months, or less. I have observed in books written by men that period assigned as the farthest to which a husband's ardor extends. Yet, after all, as a friend and companion, I hope never to become quite distasteful to my dear master." "Distasteful? And like you again? I think I shall like you again and yet again, and I will make you confess I do not only like, but love you, with truth, fervor, and constancy. Yet you are not capricious, sir." "To women who please me only with their faces, I am the very devil when I find out that they have neither souls nor hearts, when they open to me a perspective of flatness, triviality, sometimes, perhaps, imbecility, coarseness, and ill temper. But to the clear eye and eloquent tongue, to the soul made of fire, and the character that bends but does not break, at once supple and stable, traceable and consistent, I am ever tender and true." "Have you ever experienced such a character, sir? Did you ever love such a one?" "I love it now." "But before me, if I indeed in any respect came up to your difficult standard?" "I never met your likeness, Jane. You please me. And you master me. You seem to submit, and I like the sense of pliancy you impart. And when I am twining the soft silken skein round my finger, it sends a thrill up my arm to my heart. I am influenced, conquered. The influence is sweeter than I can express, and the conquest I undergo has a witchery beyond any triumph I can win." "Why do you smile, Jane? What does that inexplicable and uncanny turn of countenance mean?" "I was thinking, sir, you'll have to excuse the idea, it was involuntary. I was thinking of Hercules and Samson, with their charmers." "You were, you little elvish—" "Hush, sir. You don't talk very wisely just now, any more than those gentlemen acted very wisely. However, had they been married, they would no doubt by their severity as husband have made up for their softness as suitors. And so will you, I fear. I wonder how you will answer me a year hence. Should I ask a favor it does not suit your convenience or pleasure to grant?" "Ask me something now, Jane. The very least thing. I desire it to be entreated." "Indeed, I will, sir. I have my petition already." "Speak. But if you look up and smile with that countenance, I shall swear concession before I know to what. That will make a fool of me." "Not at all, sir. I only ask this. Don't send for the jewels. Don't crown me with roses. You might as well put a border of gold lace round that plain pocket handkerchief you have there." I might as well yield refined gold. I know it. Your request is granted, for the time. I will remand the order I dispatched to my banker. But you have not yet asked for anything. You have prayed a gift be withdrawn. Try again. Well, then, sir, have the goodness to gratify my curiosity, which is much piqued on one point. He looked disturbed. What? What? He said hastily. Curiosity is a dangerous petition. It is well I have not taken a vow to accord every request, but there can be no danger in complying with this, sir. Utter it, Jane. But I wish that instead of a mere inquiry into perhaps a secret, it was a wish for half of my estate. Now, King... No. Ahasuerus. What do I want with half of your estate? Do you think I am a Jew, sir, seeking good investment in land? I would much rather have all your confidence. You will not exclude me from your confidence if you admit me to your heart. You are welcome to all my confidence that is worth having, Jane, but for God's sake don't desire a useless burden. Don't long for poison. Don't turn out a downright Eve on my hands. Why not, sir? You have been telling me much you liked to be conquered and how pleasant over-persuasion is to you. Don't you think I had better take advantage of the confession and begin to coax and entreat? Even cry and be sulky if necessary for the sake of a mere essay of my power? I dare you to any such experiment. Encroach. Presume. And the game is up. Is it, sir? You soon give in. How stern you look now. Your eyebrows have become thick as my finger, and your forehead resembles what in some very astonishing poetry I once saw styled a blue-piled thunderloft. That will be your married look, sir, I suppose. If that be your married look, I, as a Christian, will soon give up the notion of consorting a mere sprite or salamander. But what had you to ask thing out with it? There you are being less civil now, and I like rudeness a great deal better than flattery. I had rather be a thing than an angel. This is what I have to ask. Why did you take such pains to make me believe you wished to marry Miss Ingram? Is that all? Thank God it is no worse. And how he unknit his black brows, looking down, smiling at me, stroking my hair as if pleased at seeing danger averted. I think I may confess, he said, even although I should make you a little indignant, Jane, and I have seen what a fire spirit you can be when you are indignant. You glowed in the cool moon last night when you mutinied against fate, claimed your rank as my equal, Jeanette. By the by, it was you who made me that offer. Of course I did, but to the point, if you please, sir. Miss Ingram? Well, I feigned courtship with Miss Ingram because I wished to render you as madly in love with me as I was with you. I knew jealousy would be the best ally I could call in for the furtherance to that end. Excellent. Now you are small, not one whit bigger than the end of my little finger. It was a burning shame, and a scandalous disgrace to act in that way. Did you think nothing of Miss Ingram's feelings, sir? Her feelings were concentrated in one, pride, and that needs humbling. Were you jealous, Jane? Never mind, Mr. Rochester. It is in no way interesting to you to know that. Answer me truly once more. Do you think Miss Ingram will not suffer for your dishonest coquetry? Won't she feel forsaken and deserted? Impossible. I told you how she, on the contrary, deserted me. The idea of my insolvency cooled, or rather, extinguished her flame in a moment. You have a curious designing mind, Mr. Rochester. I am afraid your principles on some points are eccentric. Once again, my principles were never trained, Jane. They may have grown a little way for want of attention. Once again, seriously, may I enjoy the great good that has been vouchsafed to me, without fearing that anyone else is suffering the bitter pain I myself felt a while ago? That you may, my little good girl. There is no other being in the world has the same pure love for me as yourself. For I lay that pleasant unction to my soul, Jane, a belief in your affection. I turned my lips to the hand that lay on my shoulder. I loved him very much, more than I could trust myself to say, more than words had power to express. Ask something more, he said presently. It is my delight to be entreated and to yield. I was again ready with my request. Communicate your intentions to Mrs. Fairfax, sir. She saw me with you last night in the hall, and she was shocked. Give her some explanation before I see her again. It pains me to be misjudged by so good a woman. Go to your room and put on your bonnet, he replied. I mean you to accompany to Millcourt this morning, and while you prepare for the drive I will enlighten the old lady's understanding. Did she think, Janet, you would give in the world for love, considered it all lost? I believe she thought I had forgotten my station, and yours, sir. Station? Station? Your station is in my heart, and on the necks of those who would insult you now and hereafter. Go. I was soon dressed, and when I heard Mr. Rochester quit Mrs. Fairfax's parlor, I hurried down to it. The old lady had been reading her morning portion of Scripture, the lesson for the day. Her Bible lay open before her, and her spectacles were upon it. Her occupation, suspended by Mr. Rochester's announcement, seemed now forgotten. Her eyes fixed on the blank wall opposite expressed the surprise of a quiet mind stirred with unwonted things. Seeing me, she roused herself. She made a sort of effort to smile and framed a few words of congratulation, but the smile expired, and the sentence was abandoned unfinished. She put up her spectacles, shut the Bible, and pushed her chair back from the table. I feel so astonished, she began. I hardly know what to say to you, Miss Eyre. I have surely not been dreaming, have I? Sometimes I half fall asleep when I am sitting alone, and fancy things that have never happened. It has seemed to me more than once when I have been in doze that my dear husband, who died 15 years since, has come in and sat down beside me, and that I have heard him call out my name, Alice, as he used to. Now, can you tell me whether it is actually true that Mr. Rochester has asked you to marry him? Don't laugh at me, but I really thought he came in here 5 minutes ago and said that in a month you would be his wife. He has said the same thing to me, I replied. He has. Do you believe him? Do you accept him? Yes. She looked at me bewildered. I could never have thought it. He is a proud man. All the Rochesters were proud, and his father at least liked money. He, too, has always been called careful. He means to marry you. He tells me so. She surveyed my whole person. In her eyes I read that they had been they had found no charm powerful enough to solve this enigma. "It passes me," she continued, "but no doubt it is true, since you say so. How it will answer I cannot tell. I really don't know. Equality of position and fortune is often advisable in such occasion, and there are 20 years of difference in your ages. He might almost be your father." "No, indeed, Mrs. Fairfax," exclaimed I, nettled. "He is nothing like my father. No one who saw us together would suppose it for an instant. Mr. Rochester looks as young, and is as young, as some men at 25. "Is it really for love he is going to marry you?" she asked. I was so hurt by her coldness and skepticism that the tears rose to my eyes. "I'm sorry to grieve you," pursued the widow, "but you are so young and so little acquainted with men. I wish to put you on your guard. It is an old saying that not all that is not gold that glitters, and it is in this case I do fear there will be something found to be different to what you expect, or I expect." "What? Am I a monster?" I said. "Is it impossible that Mr. Rochester should have sincere affection for me?" No, you are very well and much improved of late, and Mr. Rochester, I dare say, is very fond of you. I have always noticed that you were a sort of pet of his, and there are times when, for your sake, I have been a little uneasy at his marked preference, and have wished to put you on your guard. But I did not like to suggest even the possibility of wrong. I knew such an idea would shock, perhaps offend you, and you are so discreet and so thoroughly modest and sensible. I hoped you might be trusted to protect yourself. Last night, I cannot tell you what I suffered when I sought all over the house and could not find you anywhere, nor the master either, and then at 12 o'clock saw you come in with him." "Well, never mind that now," I interrupted impatiently. "It is enough that was all right." "I hope all will be right in the end," she said. "But believe me, you cannot be too careful. Try and keep Mr. Rochester at a distance. Distrust yourself as well as him. Gentlemen in his station are not accustomed to marrying their governesses." I was growing truly irritated. Happily, Adele ran in. "Let me go. Let me go to Millcourt too," she cried. "Mr. Rochester won't, though there is so much room in the new carriage. Beg him to let me go, mademoiselle." "That I will," and I hastened away with her, glad to quit the gloomy monitoress. The carriage was ready. They were bringing it round the front, and my master was on the pavement, Pilot following him backwards and forwards. "Adele may accompany us, may she not, sir?" I told her no. "I'll have no brats. I'll have only you." "Do let her go, Mr. Rochester, if you please. It would be better." "Not it. She will be restrained." He was quite peremptory, both in look and voice. The chill of Mrs. Fairfax's warnings and the damp of her doubts were upon me. Something of unsustainability and uncertainty had beset my hopes. I half lost the sense of power over him. I was about to mechanically obey him, without further remonstrance. But as he helped me into the carriage, he looked at my face. "What's the matter?" he asked. "All the sunshine is gone. Do you really wish the band to go? Will it annoy you if she is left behind?" I would far rather she went, sir. Then, off for your bonnet and back like a flash of lightning, cried he to Adele. She obeyed him with what speed she might. After all, a single morning's interruption will not matter much, said he, when I mean to shortly to claim you, your thoughts, conversation, and company for life. Adele, when lifted in, commenced to kiss me by way of expressing her gratitude for my intercession. She was instantly stowed away in the corner on the other side of him. She then peeped round to where I sat. So stern a neighbor was too restrictive to him in his present fractious mood. She dared whisper no observations, nor ask of him any information. Do let her come to me. She will perhaps trouble you, sir. There's plenty of room on this side. He handed her over as if she had been a lapdog. I'll send her to school yet, he said. But now he was smiling. Adele heard him, asked if she was to go to school, sans mademoiselle. Yes, he replied. Absolutely, sans mademoiselle. For I am to take mademoiselle to the moon, and there I shall seek a cave in which one of the white valleys among the volcano tops, and mademoiselle shall live there with me, and only me. She will have nothing to eat. You will starve her, observed Adele. I shall gather manna for her morning and night. The plains and hillsides in the moon are bleached with manna, Adele. She will want to warm herself. What will she do for fire? Fire rises out of the lunar mountains. When she is cold, I'll carry her up to a peak, lay her down on the edge of the crater. Oh, quelle est... No. Oh. Quelle est sera mal. How comfortable. And her clothes, they will wear out. How will she get new ones? Mr. Rochester professed to be puzzled. Hen, said he. What would you do, Adele? Cudgel your brains for an expedient? How would a white and pink cloud answer for a gown, do you think? And one could cut a pretty enough scarf out of a rainbow. She is far better as she is, concluded Adele, after musing some times. Besides, she would get tired with only you on the moon. If I were mademoiselle, I would never consent to coerce you. She has consented, and she has pledged her word. But you can't get her there. There is no... Oh. But you can't get her there. There is no road to the moon. It is all air, and neither you nor she can fly. Adele, look at that field. Now we were outside Thornfield gates, and bowling lightly along the smooth road to Millcourt, where the dust was well laid by the thunderstorm, and where the low hedges and lofty tender trees on each side glistened, green, and rain-fresh. In that field, Adele, I was walking late one evening about a fortnight since, the evening of the day you helped me to make hay in the orchard meadows, and, as I was tired with raking swaths, I sat down to rest me on a stile, where I took out a little book and pencil, and began to write about a misfortune that befell me long ago, and a wish I had for happy days to come. I was writing away very fast, though daylight was fading from the leaf, when something came up the path and stopped 2 yards off me. I looked at it. It was a little thing with a veil of gossamer on its head. I beckoned it to come near me. It stood soon at my knee. I never spoke to it, and it never spoke to me. and words, but I read its eyes, and it read mine, and our speechless colloquy was to this effect. It was a fairy, and come from Elfland, it said, and its errand was to make me happy. I must go with it out of the common world to a lonely place, such as the moon, for instance, and it nodded its head toward her horn, rising over Hay Hill. It told me of Alabaster Cave and Silver Vale, where we might live. I said I should like to go, but reminded it, as you did me, that I have no wings to fly. Oh, returned the fairy, that does not signify. There is a talisman will remove all difficulties. And she held out a pretty gold ring. Put it, she said, on the fourth finger of the left hand, and I am yours, and you are mine, and we shall leave earth and make our heaven yonder. She nodded again to the moon. That ring, Adele, is That ring, Adele, is in my breeches pocket, under the disguise of a sovereign, but I mean soon to change it to a ring again. But what has Mademoiselle to do with it? I don't care for the fairy. You said it was Mademoiselle you would take to the moon? Mademoiselle is the fairy, he said. Whereupon I told her not to mind his badinage. She, on her part, evinced a fund of genuine French skepticism, denominating Mr. Rochester ouvre mon tour, and assuring him that she made no account of whatever his conde fait, and that du reste elle n'y avait pas de fait, et comme m'aimait, elle y en avait. She was sure they would never appear to him, nor ever give him rings, or offer to live with him in the moon. The hour spent at Millcote was somewhat harassing one to me. Mr. Rochester obliged me to go to a certain silk warehouse where I was ordered to choose half a dozen dresses. I hated the business. I begged leave to defer it. No, it should be gone through with now. By dint of entreaties expressed in energetic whispers, I reduced the half-dozen to 2. These, however, he vowed he would select himself. With anxiety, I watched his eye rove over the gay stores. He fixed on a rich silk of the most brilliant amethyst dye and superb pink satin. I told him in a new series of whispers that he might as well buy me a gold gown and a silver bonnet at once. I should certainly never venture to wear his choice. With infinite difficulty, for he was as stubborn as a stone, I persuaded him to make an exchange in favor of a sober black satin and pearl grey silk. It might pass for the present, he said, but I would yet see you glittering like a potte. Glad I was to get him out of the silk warehouse, and then out of the jeweler's shop. The more he bought me, the more my cheek burned with a sense of annoyance and degradation. As we re-entered the carriage and I sat back feverish and fagged, I remembered what, in a hurried of events, dark and bright, I had wholly forgotten: the letter of my uncle John Eyre to Miss Reed, his intention to adopt me and make me his legatee. It would indeed be a relief, I thought, if I had ever so small a dependency. I never can bear being dressed like a doll by Mr. Rochester, or sitting like a second Danae, with a golden shower falling daily around me. I will write to Madeira the moment I get home and tell my Uncle John I am going to be married, and to whom? If I had but a prospect of one day bringing Mr. Rochester an accession of fortune, I should better endure to be kept by him now. And somewhat relieved by this idea, which I failed not to execute the next day, I ventured once more to meet my master's and lover's eye, which most preterniciously sought mine, though I averted both gaze and face. He smiled, and I thought his smile was such as a sultan might, in a blissful and fond moment, bestow on a slave of his gold and gems had enriched. I crushed his hand, which was ever hunting mine, vigorously, and thrust it back to him with red and with passionate pleasure. "You need not look that way," I said. "If you do, I'll wear nothing but my old lowered frocks to the end of the chapter. I'll be married in this lilac gingham. You may make a dressing gown for yourself out of pearl grey silk, and an infinite series of waistcoats satin." He chuckled. He rubbed his hands. "Oh, it is rich to see her and hear her," he exclaimed. "Is she original? Is she piquant? I would not exchange this little English girl for the Grand Turk's whole Seraglio, gazelle eyes, hoary forms and all." The Eastern allusion bit me again. "I will not stand you an inch in the stead of Seraglio," I said, "so don't consider me an equivalent to one. If you have a fancy for anything that line, away with you, sir, to the bazaars of Sambul without delay, and lay out in extensive slave purchases some of that spare cash you seem at a loss to spend satisfactory here." "And what will you do, Janet, while I am bargaining for many tons of flesh and such an assortment of black eyes?" "I'll be preparing myself to go out as a missionary to preach liberty to them, that they are enslaved, your harem inmates among the rest. I'll get admitted there, I'll stir up mutiny, and you, three-tailed bashaw as you are, sir, shall in trice find yourself fettered amongst our hands. Nor will I, for one, consent to cut your bonds till you have signed a charter, the most liberal that despot ever yet conferred." "I would consent to be at your mercy, Jane." "I would have no mercy, Mr. Rochester, if you supplicated for it with an eye like that. While you look so, I should be certain that whatever charter you might grant under coercion, your first act when released will be to violate its conditions." "Why, Jane, what would you have? I fear you will compel me to go through a private marriage ceremony, besides that performed at the altar. Will you stipulate, I see, for peculiar terms? What will they be?" "I only want an easy mind, sir, not crushed by crowded obligations. Do you remember what you said of Céline Varens, of the diamonds, the cashmeres you gave her? I will not be your English Céline Varens. I shall continue to act as Adèle's governess. By that I shall earn my board and lodging, and £30 a year besides. I shall furnish my own wardrobe out of that money. You shall give me nothing but—" "Well, but what?" "Your regard. And if I give you mine in return, that debt will be quit." "Well, for cool native impudence and pure innate pride, you haven't your equal," said he. We were now approaching Thornfield. "Will it please you to dine with me today?" he asked, as we re-entered the gates. "No, thank you, sir." "And what for no thank you, if one may inquire?" "I have never dined with you, sir, and I see no reason why I should start now till—" "Till what? You delight in half-phrases." "Till I can't help it." "Do you suppose I eat like an ogre or ghoul?" that you dread being the companion of my repast. I have formed no supposition of the subject, sir, but I want to go on as usual for another month. You will give up your governessing slavery at once. Indeed, I am begging your pardon, sir. I shall not. I shall go on with it as usual. I shall keep out of your way all day, as I have been accustomed to do. You may send for me in the evening when you feel disposed to see me, and I will come then, but not another time. I want a smoke, Jane, or a pinch of snuff, to comfort me under all this. Pour Madonna un continence, as Adele would say. And unfortunately, I have neither my cigar case nor my snuff box. But listen, whisper. It is your time now, you little tyrant, but it will be mine presently. And when once I have fairly seized you to have and to hold, I'll just, figuratively speaking, attach you to a chain like this, touching his wrist guard. Yes, bonny wee thing, I'll wear you in my bosom, lest my jewel I should tine. He said this as he helped me to alight from the carriage. While he afterward lifted out Adele, I entered the house and made good my retreat upstairs. He duly summoned me to his presence in the evening. I had prepared an occupation for him, for I was determined not to spend the whole time in tete-a-tete conversation. I remembered his fine voice. I knew he liked to sing. Good singers generally do. I was no vocalist myself, and in his fastidious judgment, no musician either. But I delighted in listening when the performance was good. No sooner had twilight, that an hour of romance, began to lower her blue and starry banner over the lattice, than I rose, opened the piano, and entreated him for the love of heaven to give me a song. He said I was a capricious witch, and that he would rather sing another time, but I averred that no time was like the present. Do you like my voice? He asked. Very much. I was not fond of pampering that susceptible vanity of his, but for once, and from the motives of expediency, I would e'en soothe and stimulate it. Then, Jane, you must play the accompaniment. Very well, sir. I will try. I did try, but was presently swept off the stool and denominated a little bungler. Being pushed unceremoniously to one side, which was precisely what I wished, he usurped my place and proceeded to accompany himself, for he could play as well as sing. I hied me to the window recess, and while I sat there and looked out on the still trees and dim lawn, to a sweet air was sung in mellow tones the following strain. The truest love that ever heart felt, at its core, did through each vein in quickened start the tide of being pour. Her coming was my hope each day, her parting was my pain. The chance that did her steps delay was ice in every vein. I dreamt it would be nameless bliss, as I loved to be, and to this object did I press, as blind as eagerly. But wide as pathless was the space that lay our lives between, and dangerous as the foamy race of ocean surges green, and haunted as a rubber path through wilderness of wood, for might and right, and roe and wrath between our spirits stood. I dangers dared, I hindrance scorn, I omens did defy, whatever menaced, harassed, warned, I passed impetus by. On sped my rainbow fast as light, I flew as in a dream, full glorious rose upon my sight, that child of shower and gleam. Still bright on clouds of suffering, dim shines that soft, solemn joy. Nor care I now how dense and grim disasters gather nigh. I care not in this moment sweet, though all I have rushed o'er should come on pinion, strong and fleet, proclaiming vengeance sore, though haughty hate should strike me down, right bar approach me, and grinding might with furious frown swear endless enmity. My love has placed her little hand with noble faith in mine, and vowed that wedlock's sacred band our nature shall entwine. My love has sworn with sealing kiss, with me to live, to die. I have at last my nameless bliss. As I love, loved am I. He rose and came towards me. I saw his face all kindled and his full falcon eye flashing, and tenderness and passion in every lineament. I quailed momentarily, then I rallied. Soft scene, daring demonstration, I would not have, and I stood in peril of both. A weapon of defense must be prepared. I wetted my tongue as he reached me. I asked with asperity, "Whom is he going to marry now?" Everyone. He had talked of his future wife dying with him. What did he mean by such a pagan idea? I had no intention of dying with him. He might depend on that. Oh, all he longed for, all he prayed for, was that I might live with him. Death was not for such as I. Indeed it was. I had as good a right to die when my time came as he had, but I should abide that time, and not be hurried away by a suitor. Would I forgive him for the selfish idea and prove my pardon by a reconciling kiss? No, I would rather be excused. Here I heard myself apostrophized as a hard little thing, and it was added, any other woman would have been melted at tomorrow. Any other woman would have been melted to marrow at hearing such stanzas crooned in her praise. I assured him I was naturally hard, very flinty, and that he would often find me so, and that, moreover, I was determined to show him divers rugged points in my character before the ensuing 4 weeks elapsed. He should know fully what sort of bargain he had made, while there was yet time to rescind it. Would I be quiet and talk rationally? I would be quiet if he liked. As to talking rationally, I flattered myself I was doing now. He fretted, hissed, and shawed. Very good, I thought. You may fume and fidget as you please, but this is the best plan to pursue with you, I am certain. I like you more than I can say, but I'll not sink to the bathos of sentiment. And with this needle of repart, I'll keep you from the edge of the gulf too, and moreover maintain its pungent aid that distance between you and myself most conducive to our real mutual advantage. From less to more, I worked him up to considerable irritation. Then, after he had retired in dudgeon, quite to the other end of the room, I got up, saying, "I wish you good night, sir," in my natural and wonted respectful manner. I slipped out by the side door and got away. The system thus entered on, I pursued during the whole season of probation, and with the best success. He was kept, to be sure, rather cross and crusty. But on the whole I could see he was excellently entertained, and that lamb-like submission and turtle-dove sensibility while fostering his despotism more would have pleased his judgment, satisfied his common sense, and even suited his taste less. In other people's presence I was, as formerly, deferential and quiet, any other line of conduct being uncalled for. It was only in the evening conferences I was thus thwarted and afflicted with him. He continued to send for me punctually the moment the clock struck 7, though, when I appeared before him now, he had no such honeyed terms of love and darling on his lips. The best words at my service were provoking puppet, malicious elf, sprite, changeling, etc. For caresses, too, I now got grimaces. For a pressure of the hand, a pinch of the arm, for a kiss on the cheek, a severe tweak of the ear. It was all right. At present I decidedly preferred these fierce favors to anything more tender. Mrs. Fairfax, I saw, approved me. Her anxiety on my account vanished, therefore I was certain I did well. Meantime, Mr. Rochester affirmed I was wearing him to skin and bone, and thus threatened awful vengeance for my present conduct at some period fast coming. I laughed in my sleeve at his menaces. I can keep you in reasonable check now, I reflected, and I don't doubt to be able to do it hereafter. If one expedient loses its virtue, another must be devised. Yet after all my tasks was not an easy one. Often I would rather have pleased than teased him. My future husband was becoming to me my whole world, and more than the whole world, almost my hope of heaven. He stood between me and every thought of religion, as an ellipse intervenes between man and the broad sun. I could not in those days see God for his creature, of whom I had made him an idol.